Videos for the snacks. So, as I said, this is our 10th ThinkFOOD conference, which is a little hard to believe, but here we are. And I think it's a very appropriate, this year, a really important, because we're honored to have Commissioner Randall here with us today. I'm so glad you're all here to hear. If you noticed anything about the panels today, we intentionally or unintentionally leaned toward women. A lot of women, a lot of female representation. But there are a lot of women doing really amazing work in agriculture. This is one of them. So this is Commissioner Ashley Randall, who is the first woman to lead the Department of Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Research. One of you think that she started off at a family farm. She grew up in South Deerfield, and she also exhibited the supreme champion of the open and junior divisions of the World Dairy Expo in Madison, Scotland in 2007. And she was the first person to win both divisions in the history of the competition. She attended Cornell University and got her law degree from Western University School of Law. She joined NR in 2018 and was commissioner, deputy commissioner and policy director in October 2018 before taking on this role. So as I said, we're very honored to have you here to talk to us about Massachusetts agriculture. We've heard a lot about how grateful we are to Massachusetts and what they do for farmers. We'll hear more about that too. So welcome. Thanks. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, all, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I really enjoyed all of the sessions today. That was an incredibly inspiring panel, and it is always refreshing to see so many female leaders. And those were certainly 5 of the females that are leading in the Berkshires and in New York as well. And I think it's just a testament to where we're at certainly in the state in terms of individuals in leadership positions and collaboration that we're seeing, which really excites me. I think it's a changing time, and I think the culture is changing, and that's one of the things that I think is really refreshing to see. So that gives me a lot of hope in a time where I think we all need hope, and it's something that when I talk about intentionality, I'm really thinking about is what are we doing to move the needle forward for everyone, and what is the culture that we're creating both internally at the department as well as externally with our stakeholders and community members. So today I wanted to do a little bit of a look back at where we were with the department, our history of mass agriculture, where we are presently, and what the future looks like, and some of my priorities for the state's agricultural community. And I do want to make it interactive, so if you have any questions on any of the topics as I go through them, please feel free to stop me and raise your hand. We don't have to do Q&A just at the end. So if there's anything that comes to mind, raise your hand and we'll make sure that we address any of those questions. So as was mentioned, I am locally grown and raised, and I'm really proud to be from Western Mass. Growing up in South Deerfield, my mom's side of the family had a dairy there. My dad's side of the family had a dairy in Covington. So combined, there are 9 generations of family farmers, and I was really fortunate to grow up in the 4-H program, where I really learned youth development skills and be able to exhibit my cattle at the local fairs we were hearing about. And there really was a strong focus on agriculture at the fairs. And we're fortunate that we do have 40 ag fairs in the state. And we're really trying to focus again on youth development at the fairs and that opportunity for youth to showcase whether it's livestock or vegetables or any of their competitive entries to be able to build that next pipeline of leaders. And as I said, growing up on the farm, I've always had an interest in more of the behind the scenes work. And so cleaning pens was something that I found rejuvenating, if you could say that. And so as I grew up and was on the dairy, I recognized the challenges that the dairy industry was facing and that farmers were facing from a regulatory perspective, from the market perspective. And I knew as I built out my career, I really wanted to find an opportunity and an avenue to be able to help farmers and advocate on their behalf. And when I was 12 years old, I first heard the term an agricultural lawyer. And I thought, well, that sounds cool. I could be an attorney and I like to argue. I'm an only child. And so I thought that would be a great career path. And I could work on behalf of farmers in the state. So from there, my career started to unfold. And as I mentioned, I went to Cornell and I majored in applied economics and management and animal science. And then immediately following graduation, I went to Western New England University School of Law, and I focused in environmental and sustainability law. So that foundation really helped me in terms of being able to graduate from law school, take the bar path, and then go to Maine, actually, to their Department of Agriculture, where I built out a sustainable recognition program for the farming community. And the Maine farming community is very diverse from the Massachusetts farming community and the crops, especially as you go up into northern Maine, where it's really potato country, and it's just called the county because it's just rows and rows and miles of fields of potatoes and agriculture. And I think that was one of the opportunities that really solidified I wanted to work in state government and make that my career path. And so I was very fortunate to come back in 2018 under former Commissioner LeBeau's leadership. He had called me, and I was in New York at the time working for the Northeast dairy producers. And I missed his call, and I said to my husband, unless he's calling me to offer me the deputy position, we don't have to worry about moving. Yeah. My husband said, okay, because I had just relocated from Maine to New York, and we were there for about 3 months. I got this call, and so then we went into the living room, and I said, okay, I'll play the voicemail, and we listened to it together, and it happened to be he wanted me to come back to the deputy position. So in October of 2018, came back to Massachusetts, which was great. And I fell in love with the work of the department and our team there and the farming community. And it really felt like home being at the department. And I was so fortunate in March of this year to be appointed commissioner. And it's something that I really enjoyed. And certainly it's been a difficult year, and we'll touch upon that as we go through my slides. But I also feel really fortunate to be in the position I'm in when the farmers are facing these challenges. So a little history, the Board of Agriculture is a 13-member board, and it's our oldest board in the state. As you can see, it predates USDA's founding. And the 13-member board is comprised of members from across the state representing various commodity industry. We're very fortunate Elizabeth Keene serves on the Board of Agriculture. And so we have a unique perspective from each of those individuals, whether it's vegetable or an apple grower, apiary. We are going to be adding a meat processing individual as well as an aquaculture representative, which is actually our fastest growing industry in the state. So we're trying to make it representative of the current times and also looking forward where mass agriculture is going. The department is just over 100 years old, and certainly during those times, it's changed quite a bit, as you can imagine, especially with the monocropping being primarily what mass agriculture was based upon. And in Western Mass, you can look at many of the potato farms or tobacco farms that we still have, and that was really the foundation of agriculture in the state. We also have cranberry bogs, and that's one of our native crops to the state. And I think that's an area maybe a lot of people don't know about, that Massachusetts is home to so many cranberry growers, and that we're the #2 state in production, only second to Wisconsin. So it's a pretty unique industry as well. And we also have seen in recent years, especially I would say in the last 10 to 20 years, more of the diversification. And when we heard Sarah talk about the dairy industry, that in particular is one of the industries that's really diversified if you look at value-added products and finding ways outside of the cooperative model to be able to reach consumers. So I think being able to think creatively, which we talked about earlier, is what our farmers are really good at, and finding ways to diversify to be able to reach consumers in a different way. Also thinking about the environment, it's been great that there has been heightened attention through the years on what our impacts are with farming practices and how we can make sure that we're taking care of the land so it takes care of us, but also future generations for years to come. And I think that intentionality around resource-intensive agriculture has shifted, and I think it's moving in a positive direction. But again, more awareness as well about farming practices and technical assistance that the farmers need to be less resource-intensive. So in the state, you may be surprised to know, I know some of you have seen this data before, and it is from 2017, and we're hoping the census will be coming out shortly in the new year. We do have over 7,200 farms in the state, and we have about 500,000 acres of farmland where the average size is 68 acres. So just over 60 acres. But as we heard today, the farm sizes can vary from a quarter of an acre to several hundred acres. And most of our dairy farms do have the largest land base because of hay production, corn production, as well as grazing. And as you can see, the market value of our industry is incredibly competitive and an important part of the economic development for our state. We look at 475 million in the market value, that translates to 10 billion in economic impact. And one of the things that I think people don't realize, and something that I'm really interested in, is also the global market and how we are not only competitive in Massachusetts, but how we're creating that brand awareness globally about what Massachusetts has to offer. So one of the things I've been fortunate to do the last 2 years is trade missions to various countries, Spain, Indonesia, London, and I'm headed to the UK again next week to export more products from Massachusetts, whether it's our craft beer that uses local hops, aquaculture is certainly of high value, cranberries. There's a lot of interest overseas, and I think it's really important we think globally, but we act locally. And that's something I really try to emphasize with more of our farmers and our businesses, because we do have something great to offer to other countries. And when we think about food security and food access, we need to continue to build up those pipelines and those relationships. So I think that our competitiveness is going to continue to grow. And at the same time, we also have the advantage in Massachusetts of 7 million consumers that we need to feed and make sure that everyone has access to local, healthy, nutritious food. And in the last census, I'm hoping we continue to rank in the top 5, but we did rank in the top 5 for our direct-to-consumer sales. So farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, and we've been really fortunate, and especially coming out of the pandemic, where consumers recognized the value of their local farms. And I perceive that we need to continue the messaging, because some of those sales have declined in the last year that we saw at the height of the pandemic, and continuing that awareness and that commitment from local consumers to buy local from their farms. And I think that the buy locals, we have 10 in the state. They do an excellent job. As you know, Berkshire Grown does a wonderful job making those connections. And I think we're really fortunate because not every state has that model as well. And as you can see, one of the things that is really special about Massachusetts as well is our family farms. In many other states, there's less family farms and unfortunately corporations that are owning the larger farms. So over 70% of our farms have less than 50 acres. So when we talk about land access, there are several farms that have hundreds of acres, but many of those farms are much smaller. And we know that land access continues to be a challenge for farms. And there's also the issue that we deal with at the department of development pressures. And we know that affordable housing we need in the state, we need renewable energy sources. And where do you find that balance so you're also protecting farmland for food production? And that's something that we're really mindful of. So we were fortunate back over 40 years ago to establish the first program in the country for land protection, the APR program, Agricultural Preservation Restriction Program. And currently we have over 940 farms. So we're approaching 1,000 farms, which is exciting, and over 75,000 acres that have been protected through the program. And in the next month, I can say, we'll be releasing a farmland action plan, which sets really ambitious goals, but also goals that are needed around land access, land preservation, and collaboration really with entities such as Land for Good and American Farmland Trust and all of our partners to be able to continue to protect and preserve land across the state. You did hear me say within the next month, that
jump out of my chair.
So I next wanted to just touch upon currently where we stand in the department and some of the areas that are really important to myself and my team at the department. And we also recognize that it's really important to the agricultural community. Food security, in some ways, I think this was the silver lining of the pandemic, was really brought to light at the state level. And if you recall, in April of 2020, we launched the Food Security Task Force, and Governor Baker had assembled this. We actually sent up a one-pager. We said it would be great if we could establish a task force, never thinking it would grow in the scale that it did. And we had put forth the recommendation for the Food Security Infrastructure Grant Program because we said we know how farms are going to have to adapt, things look different. And we had proposed maybe $1 to $2 billion. And the program launched with 25 million and then, excuse me, 36 million, and now has become a permanent line item at 25 million, which is incredibly exciting. And as we heard today, all of the impacts from that program that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And I think we're fortunate now with the new administration, we have that same commitment to food security, but we also have a legislature that has the Food System Caucus, which is the second largest caucus in the legislature, only to the Democratic caucus. So it's a bipartisan group of legislators that are committed to the food system, which I think helps elevate all of our work at the department and all of the partnerships that we're seeing. Another area, we've talked about access a lot, and access can mean many different things, but certainly land access is one of the key areas that we're focused on at the department. We're looking to expand our land licensing program and how as a state we can acquire property and maintain that property to be able to lease out additional acreage to farmers. Many of our contracts are 5-year contracts, and we help support the cost for infrastructure, whether it's wells or deer fencing. We have properties across the state. Many were old state hospitals, and we've been able to work on the land and find farmers to connect them. And we've really prioritized in the most recent 3 rounds, I should say, environmental justice communities and underserved farmers to have access to that land. Supply chain and infrastructure is another area. And for those that were here earlier, we talked about the Regional Food Business Center and the Regional Food System Infrastructure Grants, which are programs that USDA has put out. And so those are middle of the system producers, so processors, distributors, and looking to shore up any of those areas within our local Massachusetts and regional infrastructure system. So I think that's another great opportunity and something that will help certainly in the Berkshires and Western Mass. Mental health and wellness is another area that we don't traditionally talk about in agriculture, but I think it's incredibly important. And we were fortunate 2 years ago to be able to receive 500,000 through the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network to be able to launch a mental health and wellness program at the department. We've worked to develop training materials. We're currently in the process of bringing on a behavioral health specialist at the department to provide one-on-one assistance to farmers. And we're also building out a peer-to-peer network across the state. So certain individuals have volunteered to be a part of that. And we're making sure that all of the counties are represented in the state, and that person will be the go-to individual for farmers or community members about mental health and the resources that are available. So that training is ongoing. And as I mentioned, environmental justice, that is certainly something that is a priority for the administration, myself, and our team. And I was really delighted to hear earlier from Oleander that she really perceives our department taking the lead on the EJ work. And we've developed a strategic plan. We have an internal EJ task force that meets on a monthly basis. And we're really being intentional about how we reach more underserved individuals and populations across the state to make sure that our grant programs are accessible to them and that there's that awareness factor of all of the different opportunities that the department may be able to provide. Because I think awareness and communication is a key part of that, as well as trust building, I would say. And I think that's something we don't always talk about, but I think you have to establish the trust first. And knowing USDA and other programs in the past and how they have benefited certain communities, I think it's really important that we are intentional about that work and really thoughtful about how we're addressing our outreach and communications. And then certainly climate change. And if there was ever a year to demonstrate climate change and the impact, it was this year. And I will touch upon more of the climate change and what we're doing in the department later on in my slides. This is an overview, though, of our food system and our many programs that we offer at the department. I'm really excited to say that in the next year, we're building out a division of food security at the department. So we'll be hiring a director of food security. We'll be bringing some of our grant programs underneath that umbrella, the ones you see on here, such as the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which is a $32 million allocation for the food banks. And part of that funding has to be Massachusetts grown products. So it's a great way to support farmers and food insecure individuals. And we work with the Greater Boston Food Bank on that to distribute funding between the 4 food banks in the state, which ultimately goes out to over 1,000 food pantries across the state. Our Master and Fresher brand, many of you are familiar with it. I know many of you put the stickers on your products or you can see the posters, but that brand is also, New Jersey may disagree, but we are told the Master and Fresher is the oldest branding program in the country as well. So we were really fortunate that it stayed true, tried and true, and it's something that farmers and consumers, it's meant to be consumer facing, so consumers know that they're buying a Massachusetts product and supporting the local farm. The Mass Grown Exchange platform, I'll touch upon in the next slide. The Mass Food Policy Council, we are fortunate at the state to have a council that is consisted of state agencies, legislators, and policymakers that really care about the food system. And one of the things that hasn't always been present is what is the overall objective of the Food Policy Council? What is the goal? What are we working towards? So we were able to establish a subcommittee this year, and we're working across agencies with nonprofits and across the legislature to ultimately develop a roadmap to end hunger. And you know that will involve the farming community, all of the nonprofits, food banks, and ultimately legislative policies that will have to be passed. So it's really in the starting phase, but we've been meeting with various organizations, and Maine has somewhat of a model template for how they looked at ending hunger. And it's something that we really want to prioritize in the state to also align with the White House conference on hunger, health, and nutrition that occurred last fall. I mentioned the Food System Caucus. Again, a shout out to our buy local organizations. I feel really fortunate in the department that we're able to work with the buy locals because they're able to do things that we're not able to. And I think that's part of the partnership and the collaboration that we need more of in the state to be successful, and for them to be able to know their farmers, know the restaurants, know the consumers, and make those connections is incredibly vital. And it's the foundation for the work that we do as a department then to support the farmers. As I mentioned, our grant program and the Mass Food Trust, many of you are familiar with that as well, which was really critical too during the food security infrastructure grant program because they provided bridge loans to many operations that otherwise wouldn't have been able to take advantage of the FSIG program. And through that, I know that dairy processing facilities were launched, and it was really exciting to see how they can fill in the gaps in funding. The Food Ventures program is another great program we have at the department that was launched within the last 10 years that provides funding to businesses or entities, typically in low-income communities or those that may have food access challenges. So Nubian Markets is one example, along with the Food Trust, where we were able to provide funding. Meatworks, which is the processing facility in the other part of the state, was able to leverage funding through the Food Ventures program. And that's been another way to make sure that everyone has access to our programs. And then the Urban Ag program, certainly from Springfield to Worcester to Lowell, we've been able to fund quite a few programs that are really making an impact in terms of food access. And the Mass Grown Exchange was a platform we launched as a recommendation from the Food Security Task Force, which is a business-to-business platform. So if a farmer has 2 bushels of apples and they don't have a market for them, they can go on, they can post, and Big Y or Guido's or another entity can go on and say, I want those apples, let's connect. And we found during COVID especially, where there was lots of market channels, this really helped. And now we have, I think, over 400 listings currently, from cheese to apples, and it's really been a great way to fill in that gap, and it's a long-term solution that we foresee continuing. Agritourism is another area I just wanted to quickly touch upon, and I think agritourism can be defined in many ways. Because I think whether recently I'm just thinking of the Berkshires, whether it's John Legend coming out to visit Highland Farm or whatever it may be, it's all about the experience. And I think of agritourism as well when consumers are coming to your farm stand and the experience that they're getting because they may not otherwise be able to buy a local apple right from the orchard or see an animal. I mean, for many youth and families, there is still that disconnect with agriculture. And even in a state of Massachusetts where you can drive and see farms, a lot of people haven't ever touched a cow or got to see a horse up close or picked produce right from the ground. And I think that we're doing a really good job on the education side, and that farms are willing to host people. It's just continuing that education and outreach and making sure that there's a consumer connection to know where the farms are. And through our Mass Grown map, people can go in and search for their local farm based on zip code. And that's one way to help create that connection. And then the buy locals also put out listings, which helps consumers connect to the farm. When we talk about climate change and climate mitigation, this year we had the February 4th freeze, the May 18th frost, and the July 10th flooding, which continued throughout the summer into the fall. And it was extremely devastating for the farming community. And as we heard earlier on the panel, we have to continue to think about ways to be more climate resilient and not think just about next year, but 5 to 10 years from now, and even beyond that. I know many farms after last year put in wells this year, not knowing if it was going to be another drought or if we would have rain like we did. And no one could have anticipated that. And I think that's part of thinking creatively and what we're trying to do at the department. We launched this year an internal climate force task force. And one of the things we're really looking at is climate resiliency, looking at our grant programs and our policies, and seeing if there's further areas that we can expand upon to help farms. And I will just mention too that although I wasn't planning to have a crisis to deal with in my first year, I feel really fortunate that we had an administration and a legislature that was so supportive of the farms, and to pass $20 million in funding to be able to provide direct aid to farms was unprecedented. And I know other states look to us to see how we did it. And I said, well, it was really collaboration and everyone coming together. And sometimes that's the biggest challenge, is getting the legislature and administration and all of the stakeholders in the same place at the same time and on the same page. And we were really fortunate that that happened this year. We are currently finalizing the review of the applications. I will say we received 356 applications, totaling 42 million in requests. But we've come up with a model to be the most equitable as possible and to try and stretch the 20 million as far as possible. And we'll be making those open announcements to farms this month as well. Some of you may be familiar with our Climate Smart Ag program or hopefully benefited from it if you're a farmer. But this is really a unique model for our grant programs because it's a suite of 3 programs encompassed into one, where you have the acre program, the environmental enhancement program, and our ag energy program. And I'll say that with the ag energy program, we've really seen non-traditional projects come forward, which has been really exciting. There's been maple producers that bought electric reverse osmosis machines. We have dual use solar projects that have been able to benefit from this funding for solar on barns or rooftops. And it's really been a way to help farms become more climate resilient, cut down on their energy costs, and also receive technical assistance from our department. And I think that's been a win-win across the industry and for the farming community. And our AEP program, Ag Environmental Enhancement Program, has really been helpful on the conservation practice side. When we talk about no-till equipment and cover cropping, we've been able to provide a lot of technical assistance in that area as well. But all of those programs, especially in a year like this, we saw tremendous demand for all 3 programs, and they are always oversubscribed, and we know that will continue in the future. But from the projects and the reports that we've seen, they are making a difference in terms of climate resiliency. And I touched upon the food security infrastructure grant. There was a round that went out and was announced earlier this summer. Back in the end of July was the latest round. And that was 26.3 million in funding to 165 projects. We know that there's also federal funding that's been able to be leveraged for the current round that will be released in the next few months. And then next year we will have that permanent line item of 25 million. And this is an area when we talk about fisheries, food pantries, all members of the food system really benefiting. Again, it was incredibly competitive in terms of application, but each round, I feel like we're seeing more of the difference it's making. And especially I'll say on the access side with distribution and whether it's refrigerated vehicles, I think that was one of the biggest areas, most exciting to see, because farmers are able to take their products to markets or to parts of the state they couldn't previously because of the perishability of the products. I just wanted to end by saying that there are certainly challenges, and I recognize that farmers face more challenges than possibly ever before, but I also see them as opportunities. And I think with all of the conversations that I've heard today and the sentiments shared around collaboration and community and culture, I think that there is so much opportunity for that collaboration to continue, and it's needed. And at the department, that's something that I really look forward to, is partnering with more farmers, with more organizations, and being able to think creatively, intentionally, and thoughtfully about how we help our farmers and the farming community. And I know it's not going to be easy by any means, but it's also a challenge that I'm excited about and to be able to help with. And I just like to end by thanking all of you for all of the work that you do, and really look forward to working with all of you in the future. Thank you.
I'm sure we would be willing to have more discussion, questions. Here's your chance. Throw up those ideas.
And I also like after lunch, at donuts, I understand.
I have to plug a Berkshire Agricultural Commission event, which is November 14th, 7 to 8:30 online, which is a pesticides in children's health webinar by Dr. Sarah Evans, who's environmental scientist at the Mount Sinai Research School. So thank you very much for what you did, and I'm so glad that this happened. Thank you.
Other questions, comments, appreciation, questions, or comments?
Thank you for everything you've done. I'm truly impressed with the farm and the state and how much they've connected with the public, particularly with local food and other content. And I'm wondering if you feel like there's any group to help out forest products in the state. And I feel like I'm a forester, and I look at the farms and I'm impressed with how they're connected with the public, where I feel like forest products have not done a good job of marketing themselves at all. And kind of demonized. And I think that there's room for forest products to really help. Because a lot of the problems we're facing today, particularly the point of housing, really make those structures. So I guess I put it out there that I'm really hopeful we can support relationships and solve the problem.
I completely agree, and I think from a climate mitigation standpoint, there's a lot of benefits to forest management. And in Maine, the Department of Agriculture was combined with Conservation and Forestry. So our Department of Agriculture itself was only about 10% of the work, and much of it was forestry. And I think Maine did a really good job at marketing the forestry sector and making that connection to the consumers. And I've been talking with Commissioner Rigo at PCR about forestry, because it's a part of our work as well when we look at APR and land protection. And I do think there has to be that awareness about the benefits of the forestry industry. So I think it's an opportunity, and I can say that there's been conversations happening.
I just, like the reality that I'm faced with, where as a group, I think we produce about 5% of the wood products that we consume annually. So I think that there's a lot of room to grow to be producing what we use already locally. And so I have this tag where I say, you know, in the farm to table movement, don't forget about the orange.
Yeah.
Right, forestry, very important. Other ideas?
I should also mention, I touched upon youth development a little bit, but workforce development is another area of the department we've never really touched upon. But we're currently in the process in the next month of putting out an RFR to look at workforce development across the state, as well as ag education and what the needs are, and doing a pilot project around the climate service corps. It was one of the recommendations that came out of Chief Hopper's climate report that recently came out 2 weeks ago. And I had spoken with her about trying to build a pipeline with the schools, and she said we can do this program. And so it's something we're going to build into our RFR at the department to be able to create that incubator between high schools and community colleges and farms. So it's something I'm really excited about, and I know workforce development is one of the greatest challenges for farms and labor. So we're really looking forward to having this study done to see what we can do to help support that.
Good to hear, because it did come up in an earlier session about public schools perhaps having more agricultural programs. I'd love to be a part of that, whatever that means. So glad to know that that study is coming in the next month. So in the next month of this month. Yeah, go ahead.
Sort of picking up on that, I'm curious how you see the role of extension agencies in the state of Massachusetts. I see what a transformative role they play in like Vermont, New York, and something really lacking in this state, but I can see a lot of potential for it.
I completely agree. And I think UMass Extension, unfortunately, with the structure in place in the past, hasn't always been able to backfill positions or create new positions that are timely for the needs of industry. I know they recently brought on an urban ag extension agent, so that's a new area that they're tapping into, and also looking more at food security work. But I do think as a department, we partner with them, but because of their capacity, they're not able to do as much as ideally would be able to happen for the farms. And so it's an area with new leadership at the university. I think there's a huge opportunity to have those conversations. And we've started to have those conversations about what the needs are of our sector, as well as extension, to be able to show a unified effort. But I completely agree.
Yeah, did I see the hand over? No.
Me?
Yes, I thought.
Actually, well, no, but where I think Massachusetts really shines in terms of extension is the apiculture team. But is that not extension? Is that MDAR? The state aviarist and his team are really incredible. They do. I mean, I'm a beekeeper in Connecticut, and we don't have anything quite like your team here. But that's not extension?
It's the department.
That's the
So
department.
we're really fortunate to have Dr. Tim Sturm, who's our chief aviary inspector, and his enthusiasm. And we had 2 full-time aviary inspectors, and over the summer, we were able to find a way to bring on 2 additional full-time inspectors. And so we now have 4 full-time inspectors, as well as Dr. Sturm.
2 quick things. One, on your slide earlier, you mentioned a Massachusetts Food System Caucus, and you may have said what that is, but I may have missed it. How is that different from the Food Policy Council?
So the Food System Caucus is comprised of all legislators. And so they set their priority bills each year around land protection, the food security infrastructure grant was one of their highest priorities to become a permanent line item, the dairy tax credit. So each year they usually have about 10 bills that are their priority bills. And I want to say that was launched in 2019. And it's continued to grow in membership. I believe there's over 200 members. And so when you think about the legislature, that's pretty impressive. And as I mentioned, the Democratic caucus is the largest one, and then the Food System Caucus is the second largest. So it's really a testament to the attention that's been put on the food system.
Awesome, that's great. And my second question is around, thank you for sharing the deadline on the Mass Food System Plan coming out, which is really exciting, the Farmland Action Plan. I heard that you all might be hiring an implementation specialist. Is that true? To like help implement the plan?
So once the plan is released,
Yeah.
the posting is ready to go.
It's exciting. It'd be a awesome task for that individual.
Coming up, and I'll say too that because of the collaboration, not only between the legislature and our department, but also the stakeholders, we had our largest budget in history this year, and we were able to also obtain 13 new full-time positions. Many of those are in stewardship and land protection, but it's also a director of food security, the behavioral health specialist, and an ag markets individual. So it's been really gratifying to see that the attention around the ag system is there, and everyone really uplifted it in the budget this year.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm always very impressed by everything that Mass Department of Ag does, and working at BAB in this kind of tri-state, this little corner of the tri-states really is Massachusetts is pretty awesome, and everything you do. But I'm curious about, with the flooding this summer, and I think the grant said the money that's put aside, that 20 million is just incredible. But any thoughts on what's going to happen moving forward when we know, the climate, smart ag and then mitigation strategies are really important. We're doing a lot of work on that, but I know we're gonna, run up against these flooding and other extreme weather conditions. And how are we gonna help our farmers moving forward?
So one of the things that had been proposed for many sessions by former Senator Goby, now Director of Rural Affairs Goby, was an ag disaster relief fund. And we had pitched that, I want to say back in 2018, when I first started the department, because we recognized there were natural disasters and when whatever it may be, we recognize that those were going to continue into the future. Unfortunately, that had passed, but Rep. Lay recently picked up and adapted it. So there is a new bill out there to be more expansive and to set up a trust. So going forward, we can have funds allocated to that. And I think because of this year, even though it was extremely devastating and challenging for the farms, I think because of that attention now and knowing that we need a long-term strategy, I'm hopeful that the bill will get more attention to be able to pass.
So it's gonna go along those lines of climate change, and I think that this region impact is going to be better off for the climate regions. The country, so people who are investing in farms here are making improvements. It's really cool that 15 years ago we talked about climate and they predicted this region's gonna have water, too much to build, too much to build. If we can figure out how to even that out, we're gonna be ahead of everyone else that's not gonna have water. And our temperature is probably gonna be better than a lot of places in my country. So invest here. Don't make us look here.
I agree, because I think about the affordability factor as being the biggest barrier to people farming here. And I talk to farmers in other states, whether it's South Carolina or Florida, and they say, well, Massachusetts really is the ideal climate now. Granted, there's been devastating weather events that have happened, but you have water. And when you look at California, and they depend primarily on the Colorado River and the rights to the Colorado River in years like this year for them, where they can't access that water, have been devastating to their industries. And the almond industry in particular relies so heavily on water access that it used to be their third largest industry. And after this year, it's declined to number 5 because of those impacts, of people exiting the area. So I think we are fortunate, to your point, to be moving towards a more ideal climate for agriculture.
For newer technologies supporting innovation, something like biochar, which is the fancy word for charcoal. Do you get something for that road of Massachusetts with farmers and trying to use that as a farm solution?
I do, and I know that there's been talks at North Aggie. They're exploring a project around biochar. And there's others that are looking, I mean, when you talk about the carbon market and being able to do carbon sequestration and farms receiving payments for that. I do think we have to build out more programs that are voluntary, but also incentive based to get the buy-in from the farms to see if they work. And if they do work, then we can continue to expand out the opportunities.
Awesome.
So thinking creatively, I think we need to be open to more ideas than that.
Oh, bigger picture question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So something talked about a lot, at least in the beginning, earlier in the day, was like passing down farms and getting new young people to start taking over small farms and business. And a lot of that requires like a way to get people incentivized into farming and to get people interested. And something I know we touched upon in this in this presentation discussion. Sorry, but with getting public schools involved. And Science Rock itself is not a public school, private school. But it has a farm program here that is very much on its way to becoming bigger and more successful. But at the moment it's kind of halted in terms of growth and having a foundation or its operations. And I was wondering, like, are there ways to help start up programs like that, as well as what does it take to fully get these types of programs like running and functioning, and especially within a larger institution, how to give back and make it function self-sustainable in itself. And to help give back to communities by getting people into farming, especially the last panel that was held, and unfortunately I don't remember her name or their name, but they were talking about liberating themselves through farming in order to liberating other people with farming in order to liberate themselves, and especially having an institution helping to, I could say, more farmers in this world. Like, how do you do that?
Great question. I think when we think about our connection in terms of ag education, we work with the 4 ag schools primarily in the state, but I see an opportunity, especially with 4-H and FFA programs, as well as youth that are interested in learning about the food system and food system literacy, to be able to expand our work. So through the budget, we were also able to obtain $50,000 for food system literacy. So one of the things we want to do in the springtime is convene a conference of students, educators, and be able to try to answer those tough questions about how we can support private institutions and public to be able to have more of that awareness and active on the ground farming take place.
A large team likes to be in farming, but the small bit I've experienced so far at ThinkFOOD, it's very community oriented, and in order to hold a space for that community, you need a foundation. And for example, like the foundation to have that community is the actual farm we grow food, but in the winter time, for example, when that's gone, we don't really have that foundation gone. And so how do we carry that program and that spirit and that life force like through the off season and just how do we all right, whenever I build it up and then I forget this one. So it's like I'm just a farm intern. And I'm trying to make more farm interns. And I want to be able to help those in the community around farming because I think accessibility is so important and joy is important. And at least through growing my food, building bonfires and people get together and some music and those hot dogs, like I have found a lot of joy. And I want to help and bring people into that and that foundation.
Well, I think in the off season, the winter months, farmers call planning season. And I think it's an opportunity to engage with your classmates who also have a similar interest in either bringing in farmers to talk with them, community leaders, or do trainings to prepare for the springtime and keep that momentum and excitement going. Because there's always something to plan for. So whether it's what seeds you want to select for the growing season and what you really want to focus on, or if you want to try culturally relevant crops in the next growing season, I think it's a good way to incentivize and motivate the other members of the community.
I think you're going to be instrumental to this, Gilbert. So,
people exactly in your age group who we move into some forestry things. We do wood chore, sawmill, we do seed and planting, and we are really nearby and are a resource. So it doesn't solve the longer, bigger question because it's an amazing question that I think many of us are thinking about here. But in the short term, there is a community that is still farming and accessible for the students here. And Marianne.
I do know where. I know where to make a plan.
Yeah, I can say, also, it's been a really cool relationship between, Simon Rock and Southern Berkshire Regional School District. So I think you may have room in the middle of that public school. My daughters of which are in that school system, and sadly, they don't live
So there's connections that we can make here. And I think, thank you for that reminder. You are not far away. You have
We still have lots to do.
Good, so I want to thank Commissioner Randall for being here, for giving us that wonderful talk. All of you for being here and making this another successful ThinkFOOD. So congratulations, we made it 10 years. I'll see you the next one.